It's September 1939, and Poland is fighting on a timetable it didn't write. In a muddy field, under constant shelling, a young artillery cadet named Leon Gladun drives a blacked-out truck full of wounded men to a field hospital, then back to the guns, running on exhaustion and one fragile idea: that help is already on the way. That night, he writes a line that captures the entire Polish gamble. About 60,000 Englishmen have landed in Poland. God grant this be true. Because the Allied promise wasn't hope, it was a schedule. Small attacks within 3 days, a major French offensive by day 15. On paper, the moment is perfect. Germany's western front is thin, while its main force crushes Poland. But history doesn't break on paper. It breaks at the moment someone hesitates. As Poland bleeds for time, France advances cautiously into the Saar, takes ground, loses a few tanks, and then stops. Not because it can't push harder, but because fear of another Verdun is louder than the logic of the moment. This is the story of that pause, the countdown Poland trusted, and the quiet decision that turned Allied advantage into a disaster measured in days. When Leon arrives at the field hospital, it's chaos. Stretchers line every room. Nurses step over boots and bags. The air is thick with disinfectant, sweat, and blood. Leon helps lift his friends onto stretchers, then stands there, dizzy, not knowing what to do with his hands. Someone shouts his name and tells him to get the truck back to the battery. More wounded are coming. That night, after more firing and more noise, Leon finds a few minutes to write in his diary. His handwriting shakes a bit, but one line stands out. He's heard a rumor passed along the line. About 60,000 Englishmen have landed in Poland. God grant this be true. To Leon, this makes perfect sense with everything he's been told. France and Britain promised to help Poland. The plan, as Polish officers understand it, is simple. Within 15 days of mobilization, the French army will attack Germany from the west. Dozens of divisions, hundreds of guns, tanks, and aircraft. If Poland can just hold on long enough, a huge Allied hammer will smash Germany from behind. Poland hangs on. France attacks. Germany has to split its forces, and the pressure eases. The math seems simple. But Leon doesn't know what's actually happening on the Western Front. While he grips that steering wheel in the dark, France and Britain have put roughly 110 divisions in the field facing Germany. On the other side of the border, Germany has only about 23 divisions. On paper, that's nearly a 5-to-1 advantage. It looks like the perfect moment to attack. Instead of a crushing offensive, the French army tiptoes across the border, loses a few tanks and a few thousand men, and then stops. The rest of their strength sits behind concrete forts and steel doors. To understand why, we need to go back a few months. In Paris, in May 1939, life looks normal. People drink coffee at sidewalk tables. Buses rattle past posters advertising plays. But underneath the chatter is a dull fear. One newspaper runs a headline: "Why die for Danzig?" The author, Marcel Diaz, is a well-known politician and veteran of the last war. 20 years earlier, France lost over 1 million men in the trenches. Entire generations of young men never came home. White crosses and stone memorials are everywhere. The old officers now running the army carry the scars of Verdun and the Somme. The idea of another big offensive into Germany means streets full of black armbands, funerals, and empty chairs at dinner tables. A few months before the war begins, French and Polish officers sign an agreement. They map out the plan. If Germany attacks Poland, France will mobilize and move immediately. Within 3 days, French units will start small attacks. By day 15, a main offensive will begin, with about 40 divisions pushing forward with heavy artillery and tanks. Germany will be caught fighting on 2 fronts before it's ready. Polish officers copy these lines into their plans. They build their whole defense around one idea: we can retreat toward the southeast, trading space for time. Because by then, the French will be in Germany. By early September 1939, Leon is finishing his training in a small town called Klizhemieniec, near Poland's eastern border. He studied science, knows how to handle horses, can work a slide rule, and can compute firing angles. His uniform is still new. He has a few family photos tucked into his things. On September 1st, German troops cross the Polish border. Stuka dive bombers screen toward airfields and rail junctions. In Krzemieniec, an orderly knocks on the Gladun family's door with mobilization papers. Leon packs in minutes, a spare shirt, socks, a small wash kit. He slips his family photos into his pocket. The house smells of soap and boiled potatoes. His mother hugs him tightly. His grandmother crosses herself over and over. Nobody knows what to say, so they repeat the same few words. Come back. Be careful. God keep you. Then he's out the door, boots hitting familiar cobblestones in a new, unfamiliar rhythm. At the mobilization point, the air is thick with dust and voices. Names are shouted, lists checked, uniforms handed out. Someone jokes that the war will be over by Christmas. Another voice counters, maybe by then the French will already be in Berlin. The words, 15 days, bounce from mouth to mouth like a charm against fear. A few days later, in Warsaw, American photojournalist Harrison Foreman lifts his camera. It's September 3rd. Radio announcements have just told the city that Britain and France have declared war on Germany. Church bells ring. People pour into the streets. Foreman moves with his camera, snapping frame after frame. Boys climb a lamppost to tie a Polish flag higher. A woman clings to her husband's uniform with her eyes shut. Someone waves a newspaper with huge letters about France and Britain at war. Flags flutter from windows. Strangers shake hands. People stop Foreman and ask the same thing. Now they will attack Germany, yes? Across the continent, trains full of young Frenchmen are moving east. On a platform in Alsace, a conscript named Bernard Grussel steps down with his kit bag. Bernard is in his 20s, thin, dark-haired, with quiet eyes that keep moving, taking things in. He's been sent to a sector of the Maginot Line, the massive chain of forts and bunkers that France has built since the last war. When he walks out of the station, he sees it for the first time. Grey concrete blocks jut out of hillsides. Barbed wire runs along the crests. Squat turrets sit on bare slopes like steel mushrooms. An officer meets them and says, "You are lucky to be assigned here. This is the most modern fortress system in the world. Every danger is anticipated. The Germans will break their teeth on it." Inside, roughly 2 million French soldiers are mobilized. The British are forming up. Dozens of divisions are deployed along the frontier. The Maginot guns can throw shells over 15 kilometers. For a brief window in early September, the Allies really do have a heavy advantage in the west, while Germany's forces are concentrated in Poland. But around the table where the real decisions are made, those numbers compete with memories. Officers remember ordering attacks that gained a few hundred meters at the cost of 10,000 lives. Politicians remember funerals. A few days after the crowds cheered in Warsaw, French infantry finally march into Germany. It's still dark when the men of the 32nd Infantry Regiment move into the Vannes forest. The air is damp and cold. A fine mist hangs between the trees. Sergeant Chef Gustave Rabier, a stocky non-commissioned officer with a lined face, walks along the column, checking that his men keep their spacing and their grips on their rifles. They've trained for this. When they cross the sign at the edge of the road, they step from France into Germany. The French High Command has committed about 11 divisions to this offensive. On the ground, it doesn't feel small to Rabier and his men. On the map, it looks like the beginning of the big push they were told about. In reality, almost no German combat units stand in front of them. Hitler has concentrated most of his army in Poland. The western frontier is held by a thin screen of understrength divisions with orders to delay, but not get destroyed. Somewhere ahead, German engineers have buried mines and laid booby traps. When the first French tank hits one, the explosion rips it apart. A sheet of flame and dirt rises above the trees. Men throw themselves into the wet leaves as jagged metal whistles over their heads. Medics scramble forward. The smell of burnt fuel mixes with the cold, damp air. By the end of that day, they've advanced only a few kilometers. They've lost several tanks and more than a dozen men killed and wounded. 2 days later, on September 12th, they're ordered to attack again. Their target is a small German village called Brenschelbach. As they approach, most of the shutters are closed. Dogs bark, then fall silent. A few German rearguard troops fire and slip away. The main German force has already pulled back. When it's over, French soldiers stand in the village square, breathing hard, fingers still tight on their rifles. A French flag is tied to a German milestone. Someone takes a picture, grinning, with one boot on a knocked-over road sign. Then they start counting. A captain, a sergeant, and several privates from Rabia's regiment are dead. Others are being carried to the rear, faces pale, bandages seeping through. While Rabia and his men are fighting in the Saar, Allied leaders meet in the town of Abbeville. They sit around a table and listen to reports about these gains. They hear about the advance into the Vaunt forest and the capture of villages. They know from intelligence that Germany's main forces are still deep in Poland. They also know that assaulting the main German fortifications could turn into a costly slog. General Gamelin, the French commander-in-chief, argues that the French army isn't fully ready for a large offensive. The best course is to wait. Nobody in that room wants to sign an order that might lead to tens of thousands of French dead. They agree that what has been done is enough. France has fulfilled its duty. Orders go out. Stop the offensive. The 11 divisions in the Saar are told to hold the line of villages they've taken. No assault on the main German defenses, no deeper push. In a few weeks, they'll quietly pull back to the Maginot Line. Standing in a German village they fought to take, they're now told to dig in and wait. The road ahead, the one they imagine stretching into Germany, is closed by a piece of paper and a few signatures. Rabia looks at the hills beyond Brenschelbach and wonders what would have happened if they'd been told to keep going. Back in Poland, by mid-September, Leon can see that the distance between belief and reality grows with every shell. His battery has been firing almost non-stop. The gun trails are sunk deep into mud. Spent shell casings pile up, still warm to the touch. The men move like old men now, joints aching, eyes red. They no longer jump at every explosion. On the 16th, German artillery finally finds them properly. One salvo lands hard and fast. A shell flips a gun shield and throws a man into the air. When the smoke clears, one of Leon's comrades lies twisted at an angle no body should take. Another clutches his leg, blood pumping between his fingers. Leon is ordered to drive the wounded to the field hospital again. The road is worse now, cut up by tank tracks, cratered by shells. Smoke lies low over the fields. On the horizon, the sky is stained brown where villages burn. As he drives, he thinks of the rumor. About 60,000 Englishmen landed somewhere on the coast. Maybe they're already fighting their way inland. Maybe French tanks are rumbling through German valleys. Maybe German guns will go quiet tomorrow because they have to turn around and face the west. At the hospital, the scene is even more crowded than before. Men with bandaged heads sit on benches staring at nothing. A boy whose uniform still smells new looks up at Leon with wide eyes as orderlies carry him past. Leon unloads his wounded, feels useless, and jumps back in the truck. That night, the rumor grows. Some say it's not 60, but nearly 100,000 British coming. Others claim French troops are already near Berlin. Nobody has proof, but in a situation with so little good news, nobody wants to be the one to crush hope. In Warsaw, Harrison Foreman walks streets that no longer look like the ones he filmed on September 3rd. Whole facades are missing. Shop fronts are smashed. Glass crunches under his boots. He photographs a tram stuck in the middle of the road, its roof torn open, its windows blown out. Firefighters spray water into buildings that still smolder. He sees people queuing at public pumps for water because the mains have been hit. Children clutch tin buckets bigger than their torsos. Old men use wheelbarrow handles as crutches. On the roads leading out of the city, endless lines of refugees move through dust and smoke. Carts piled with bedding and pots. Cows led by rope. A piano strapped to a wagon with its keys facing the sky. Drivers lean on their horns. Soldiers try to direct traffic and cough from the fumes. Again and again, people ask the same question. When will the French attack in force? On September 17th, another sound joins the chaos. From the east comes the rumble of different engines as Soviet troops cross the border under a secret clause in the pact Joseph Stalin made with Hitler weeks earlier. Polish units, who thought they had an escape route to the southeast, suddenly find another enemy in front of them. In staff headquarters, officers look at their clocks and at the wording of the Franco-Polish agreement. Day 15 has come and gone. The offensive in the Saar hasn't turned into the promised main attack. The German army in the west hasn't been forced to turn around. Poland has held out alone while time has run out. Leon sees Soviet soldiers with red stars on their caps, armed and calm, claiming to be liberators. He sees Polish officers, including senior commanders, separated from their men and loaded onto trains heading east. He sees men toss their last cigarettes to each other. He sees the Polish eagle taken down and other flags raised in its place. His family will later say, "The promised military response of France and England never materializes." For Leon, that's tied to the faces of men he left at the hospital, to the sound of Soviet boots on Polish soil, and to the feeling of a train moving farther and farther from the front he thought he was defending. On the Western Front, the Saar troops start pulling back. The small bump on the map shrinks. French units settle down behind the Maginot Line. The big guns that could have fired in support of an offensive now stare across no man's land at an enemy that no longer has to worry about its rear. Life in the Maginot Line isn't glamorous. The entrance to Bernard's fort is a squat concrete block with a steel door. You walk through it, down a steep stair, and into a long tunnel. The air is cool and smells of oil and metal. Electric lights buzz overhead. Somewhere inside, engines thump, turning fuel into electricity. Air pumps hum and thud, forcing air through filters designed to keep out gas and smoke. Bernard sleeps in a bunk room with metal frames bolted to the wall, 3 high. Mattresses are thin, but better than concrete. Blankets smell faintly of detergent and many bodies. He hangs his jacket on a hook and tucks family photos into the small space between the mattress and the wall. At night, the low ceiling and constant vibration of machinery make it feel like sleeping inside a ship. Their days follow a rhythm. Wake up, coffee and bread in the mess, roll call, inspect rifles, check ammunition, clean equipment. When the alarm rings, every man sprints to his battle station. Heavy armored shutters grind open. Gunners adjust their pieces, swinging barrels toward imaginary targets. Observers peer through narrow slits, searching for movements on the hillside. An officer calls, "End of exercise," and the shutters close with a clank. In the kitchen, cooks chop potatoes, ladle out thin soup, and bake bread. The telephone room is full of wires, dials, and headsets. Messages click back and forth between forts and command posts. From time to time, they hear artillery in the distance. Sometimes German guns probe the line. Sometimes French batteries answer. For long stretches, there's nothing but drills, maintenance, and rumors. In October 1939, the fort at Hochwald receives a visitor who has seen real war before. Roland d'Orgelès, a famous writer and veteran of the First World War, is invited to tour the fortress. Officers in clean uniforms walk him through the galleries, pointing things out with pride. Here are the bunk rooms, neat and lined with beds. Here is the kitchen, with shining pots and stacks of tins. Here is the command post, with maps and telephone lines. Here are the turrets, heavy steel domes that can rise, fire, and drop back into the earth. The Maginot Line is designed like a machine. If one power cable is cut, another can take its place. If one air pump fails, others can keep the air moving. Elsewhere along the line, Louis-Joseph Soula is working on a copper plate. Before the war, he was known for engravings of quiet town scenes. Now, he wears a uniform. In April 1940, he sketches his comrades in a cramped firing position. One man stands at a sighting instrument, eye pressed to glass, shoulders hunched. Another stacks shells within easy reach. A third leans against a heavy armored door, listening. He engraves the image and calls it, "In the Maginot Line." The men are calm, ready, and protected. Bernard writes letters home about the food, the jokes the men tell, how the engine room is so hot you could fry an egg on the metal floor. He mentions faint explosions sometimes, but mostly it's routine. He hears about Poland's defeat, about evacuations from cities, and about the British Expeditionary Force taking up positions on French soil. Rumours also reach him that a big offensive is still being planned for spring, that blockade will strangle Germany without anyone needing to attack, that the Germans are too afraid of the Maginot Line to come anywhere near it. Up north, in German staff rooms, officers like Erich von Manstein are sketching plans that will send armoured divisions through the Ardennes, a region many French officers consider too rough for serious tank operations. They're not planning to smash the Maginot Line head-on. They're planning to go around it. On May 10, 1940, the war stops being dormant. News crackles through radios in the forts. Germany has attacked Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. Reports come in of paratroopers dropping on bridges, planes bombing airfields, tanks crossing borders. Maps that were static for months sprout new arrows overnight. In the bunkers, alarms sound. Men race to their stations. Shutters slam open. Guns are loaded for real, not for exercise. Bernard feels the air change. The familiar smells, oil, coffee, sweat, are joined by something sharper. In 1914, the German army also went through Belgium, and French commanders send their best units north to meet what they think is the main blow. But this time, the main storm is coming from a different direction. In the Ardennes, German armoured divisions push through forests and over rivers with a speed the French High Command didn't expect. They punch through thin defensive screens, cross the Meuse, and then fan out into open country. Within days, large Allied forces in Belgium realize they're in danger of being encircled. Roads clog with troops and refugees. Aircraft roar overhead. Messages from staff officers grow panicked. In Bernard's sector, the noise builds. He might not know the exact details, but he can feel that something is different. The barrage is heavier. Reports of German units approaching from unexpected directions filter down. There's talk of enemy tanks in places everyone thought were safe. Some Maginot forts come under heavy bombardment, concrete shaking, dust falling, lights flickering. In some sectors, casemates are attacked directly. In others, the forts aren't attacked at all. The war flows around them, leaving them as isolated pockets surrounded by German-held land. Out in the open, men from units like the 32nd fight desperate holding actions along rivers. Bridges become killing grounds. Columns are caught on roads and torn apart by air attack. Gustave Rabier, who once led men into the Vente forest toward Germany, now fights on his own soil, under a sky streaked with tracer fire. He doesn't survive. For Bernard, new orders arrive. He's told to leave the fort and join a withdrawal. Maybe they need to shorten the front. Maybe they fear being surrounded. Maybe the command chain above him is already broken. He finds himself on a road instead of in a bunker, marching through villages with his unit, seeing for the first time what the war looks like outside concrete walls. He sees columns of refugees pushing carts piled with furniture, children trudging beside them, houses on fire, roads cratered and blocked by wrecked vehicles. He hears the howl of dive bombers and the rattle of machine gun fire from the sky. At some point, near a farm, his unit is caught. Soldiers are told to stack their rifles. Hands go up. German troops with steel helmets and submachine guns move in. Bernard stands in a line with other prisoners, hands clasped behind his head, staring at the ground. The fortress that once felt like the center of the war is now behind him, irrelevant. Soulas's war also takes a turn. He joins a column of prisoners, marches along roads under guard, and at some station gets loaded into freight cars and sent to a camp in Pomerania. The journey is long, cramped and airless. When the doors finally slide open, there's barbed wire, watchtowers, and barracks. He spends months behind that wire, watching seasons change over fences. Later, those images become engravings, souvenirs of captivity, lines and shadows that carry the memory of imprisonment. By late June 1940, France sues for an armistice. What many expected to be a grinding war of years has turned into a collapse of weeks. Roughly 65,000 French soldiers are dead. Many more are wounded or prisoners. German troops march under the Arc de Triomphe, while the government flees south. The Maginot Line, which was supposed to guarantee security, has been bypassed and, in many places, reduced to silent cubes of concrete in enemy-held territory. Being a prisoner on a farm in 1940 isn't dramatic. Bernard and the men captured with him are set to work. They milk cows, cut hay, repair fences. A German guard leans on a rifle nearby, watching, but not always really looking. The farmyard becomes their world. They sleep in barns or makeshift barracks, eat what they're given, always a little less than they need, and talk in low voices at night about home, about rumors of resistance, and about whether the war is lost for good. News filters in slowly. Some say that a French general named de Gaulle has escaped to London and made a speech calling on soldiers to continue the fight. Others say that units in North Africa have refused to accept defeat. Nobody knows what's true. At some point, Bernard hears enough to form a picture. There's still a France that wants to fight, but it's far away. Getting to it means risking everything. His choice is simple in theory and terrifying in practice. He can stay on the farm, keep his head down, work, and wait. The war will end in a year or two, maybe. Or he can try to escape, knowing that if he's caught, the punishment will be harsh and could be deadly. He chooses to run. One night, when the guards are tired and the sky is dark, he and perhaps one or two others look for a weakness. A section of fence where the wire is old. A corner where a watchtower's view is blocked by a tree. A moment when a patrol's footsteps fade in one direction. They slip through. Hands catch on rough wood. Wire snags at cloth. For a heart-stopping second, they're silhouettes against the horizon. Then they're in the fields, crouched low, moving as fast and as quietly as they can. The next days are a blur of hedgerows, ditches, and whispered questions at unfamiliar doors. Some civilians turn them away, afraid. Others give them food, a place in a barn, and directions to the next village where someone trustworthy might live. They travel mostly at night. Eventually, Bernard reaches North Africa. Under a sun that burns through clothing in minutes, he finds soldiers wearing the Cross of Lorraine, the symbol of the Free French. General Philippe Leclerc is gathering men who refuse to accept the armistice. Bernard joins them. His war starts again in a new form. He marches with columns across deserts where sand gets into everything. He rides in trucks where dust coats teeth and tongues. He learns the feel of a rifle that's been in his hands for months. He fights in units that move with speed, hitting and fading, then hitting again. He watches comrades fall and keeps going because there's finally a sense that they're pushing forward instead of just holding on. Later, he comes back to Europe via another invasion, this time with the Allies landing on beaches and pushing inland. He sees French towns freed instead of falling. By 1945, he's part of a column driving into Germany itself, up narrow alpine roads toward Berchtesgaden, a symbol of Hitler's power. As his truck grinds uphill with pines on either side and snow still lingering in the shaded folds, Bernard has time to think. He thinks of the bunker smell of oil and concrete. He thinks of the farmyard where he stood as a prisoner with his hands on his head. He thinks of the choice he made to climb a fence and run. He thinks, maybe, of the fact that this road into Germany is the one he expected to see in 1939, not 6 years and so many deaths later. Far away, on a different road, Leon's journey through the war takes him east. After being disarmed by Soviet troops, he's sent to a camp at Kozielsk. The camp is cold and crowded. Officers who once commanded batteries now live in wooden barracks packed into bunks. They talk, pray, argue about politics, share scraps of food, and worry about their families with no way to reach them. Leon keeps writing. Even when little happens beyond roll calls and watery soup, he puts words on paper. He notes who is moved and when. He notes letters received and rumors spread. His diary, which began as the record of a mobilization and a battle, becomes a record of slow fear and uncertainty. In 1940, many of the officers in camps like Kozielsk are taken away in groups, supposedly for transfer. Trucks arrive. Names are read. Men wave to their friends and climb aboard. The trucks drive off. The men don't return. Later, their bodies will be found in mass graves in forests like Katyn, shot and buried in layers. Leon isn't on those lists. For reasons of timing, assignment, or simple luck, he's sent elsewhere instead. His diary survives with him, and when the war finally ends and investigators look into what happened to the missing officers, his notes become one of the many pieces of evidence showing who was where and when, and what they expected from their allies. Back in France, Soulas is released from captivity in 1941. He returns to a country under occupation. German soldiers patrol streets he knew as a child. Later, Allied bombers will hit cities like Orléans, adding rubble from liberation to the rubble from defeat. In his studio, he sets out copper plates and ink. He engraves what he remembers: barbed wire snaking across the foreground, watchtowers against flat skies, row upon row of barracks. Later, he adds images of broken churches, collapsed bridges, and streets choked with ruins. The tidy order of the Maginot casemate gives way to the fragile lines of shattered towns. After the guns fall silent, the world tries to make sense of what happened. In 1945 and 1946, in a courtroom at Nuremberg, leading figures of the Nazi regime sit in the dock. The room is high and cold. Flags hang behind the judge's bench. Interpretation booths line the walls. Translators speak into microphones, turning German into English, French, and Russian. Journalists scratch notes, and the eyes of people far beyond the room focus on the faces inside the glass box where the accused sit. Among them are Alfred Jodl and Wilhelm Keitel, men who once signed orders that set armies in motion. They're asked to explain those orders now, under oath, with the war lost and the world listening. At some point, prosecutors ask about autumn 1939. How many divisions did Germany have in the West when it attacked Poland? What did the German High Command expect France to do? What would have happened if the French had launched a full-scale offensive? Jodl answers in dry, careful language. During the Polish campaign, Germany had only about 23 divisions holding the Western Front. The rest were in Poland. Had France attacked with the dozens of divisions it had available, he admits, Germany would have faced serious danger. It might have had to pull units out of Poland, weakening the campaign there. It might have seen its industrial heartland in the Ruhr threatened. Keitel notes that German soldiers on the Western Front were surprised nothing major happened. They had braced for a big French attack. They dug in. They waited. It didn't come. These aren't Polish officers bitter about betrayal. They're German officers explaining, from their side, how critical that Allied inaction was. The imbalance that Leon couldn't see from his muddy field, roughly 110 Allied divisions facing about 23 German divisions, is confirmed as a real, dangerous asymmetry that Germany survived partly because the Allies chose not to act on it. Far from the courtroom, in a quiet archive, Leon's diary lies open on a table. A researcher wearing gloves turns the pages carefully, reading his words about mobilization, bombardment, the rumor of 60,000 Englishmen landing, the shock at seeing Soviet troops, and the sense that promised help never really arrived. For them, it's both a personal story and a document that fits into a larger investigation about crimes and alliances. In a gallery, visitors walk past Soulas's prints. They see In the Maginot Line, with its calm casemate and steady-faced soldiers, and then Souvenirs of Captivity, with its wire, watchtowers, and distant horizons. If they look at the dates, they can trace the arc. Early 1940, trust in concrete. Early 1940s, memory of fences and ruins. Sometimes, in documentaries or books, a photograph appears of 3 French soldiers in the Bavarian Alps in 1945, standing in the courtyard of a building at Berchtesgaden. Among the faces there might be Bernard's, or a man like him, one of thousands who took the long road from bunker to farm to desert to mountain. At the beginning, men like Leon and Bernard and the civilians around them believed in promises and fortresses. Poland believed that if it could hold for a couple of weeks, France would launch a major offensive and force Germany to split its forces. French soldiers believed that the Maginot Line would let them fight on their own terms, avoiding another bloodbath like Verdun. Writers described peace held in concrete. Artists engraved images of calm readiness. As events unfolded, that belief was tested and broken. The French attack into the Saar was real, but limited and short. Poland held out against 2 invaders until it was split and occupied. France pulled back into fortifications and spent months waiting while the window for action closed. When Germany finally moved west in force, it went around the line, not through it, and brought France to its knees in 6 weeks. Even enemy generals later admitted that in 1939, the Allies had a major advantage in the West that they never fully used. Leon's diary records, from below, the lived experience of watching that opportunity pass by. Bernard's journey shows how, in the end, French soldiers could and did fight offensively inside Germany, but only after their country had been conquered and they'd become exiles. Soulas's art shows a shift from proud fortifications to the raw lines of captivity and destruction. Tens of thousands of Polish soldiers died, and hundreds of thousands became prisoners. Around 65,000 French soldiers died in the fighting of 1939 and 1940. The spine of this story is simple and painful. People who trusted in cautious leaders and concrete fortresses went from believing they were protected to realizing that inaction and fear had left them exposed. Leon went from writing, "God grant this be true," about imaginary British landings, to living through Soviet captivity and knowing that the great French offensive never came. Bernard went from being told his job was to watch from a safe bunker to realizing that the only way to truly fight was to leave that safety behind and join a risky, long campaign through Africa and Europe. The Maginot Line went from symbol of security to symbol of a blind spot. In the end, the men who once sat in warm rooms and decided that 11 divisions in the Saar were enough heard, even from their enemies, that a bolder move might have changed the early course of the war. A young Polish cadet clutches a steering wheel in a dark truck, repeating a rumor about roughly 60,000 Englishmen, while on the other side of the continent, more than 100 Allied divisions stand still. The gap between what he thought was happening and what actually was, that's where this whole story lives.